Happening right now on Sports Extra, it is the end of an era in Braves country. As Brian Snitker steps away from managing, we'll take a look back at Snit's career and the legacy that he leaves on this franchise. Plus, the Dogs, they got back into the win column after a dominating win over Kentucky. And it is an early bye week for the Falcons, so we will look ahead to next week's massive Monday Night Football game against the Bills.
Honestly, I never thought I'd manage one day in the major leagues, let alone 10 years.
It's a better feeling than last week. But I mean, a win in the SEC is always hard, and we're on to next week's.
You name it, we've got it here at Atlanta Sports. Everything that you can think of happened this week. We got you covered every single step of the way. Sports Extra, it starts now. Welcome into the show, everybody. We have a full house of 92.9 The Game guests with me, and two of my favorite guests that come on the show. Also a favorite Sunday because we don't have to worry about stressing out about the Falcons.
So nice.
There are plenty of Sundays for that, or Mondays, which is what we're going to be talking about here shortly. But 92.9 The Game, completely in the house. We have Joe Patrick right to my right, not at Flowery Branch today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great, and we don't have to make the drive to Flowery Branch.
Right.
We will next week, of course. We'll be back at it. And Grant McCauley, who knows all things about the Braves and the Falcons, he's talking all things on 92.9 The Game as well. Grant, it is great to have you here.
Thank you for having me as always.
Let's talk really quickly about Brian Snitker. It's hard to summarize nearly 50 years of a career with the same organization, but what was your level of surprise when you heard he was stepping down?
I don't think there was really much to be surprised about. I think it was more so as the season wore on and we got to the final month that it turned into maybe he wanted to come back, whereas it felt like coming into the season, maybe he'd already made up his mind. As we found out, I think he had made up his mind just based on the contract, but you know, it takes a minute maybe to let the competitor die down and then let reality set in. I think he did that, and now he gets to go be a grandfather, a husband, and a special advisor to the Braves.
Gets to fish a lot more. He's very passionate about that. He showed up to a couple interviews with me ready to go fishing, which is hilarious. He'll be ready to do that a lot now. Joe, quick from you. Were you surprised at all that Snit was stepping down?
Yeah, no, not too much. I mean, and I really respect the fact that he was professional to the point where he wanted to keep the team, you know, first and foremost of his mind, not really thinking about whether he's going to retire or not. And I think that he's the kind of guy who wouldn't have really wanted the whole like banquet that you go down when you've announced the retirement and you're kind of well known. So respect to him for that, and I think that I think it was the right thing basically for all parties. I think everybody will be good going forward.
We have plenty to talk about with the skipper, but let's hear from him himself.
I never thought I'd hoist a trophy. Or be around a group of guys that that makes this so special. And it took a while after, because you get in game mode and that game adrenaline, and I'm sitting in this seat and I'm sitting in that office and my focus is on today and winning that game. And just like I always told the players, it's like you're never guaranteed tomorrow. So the most important day you have is today, and you do everything you can, and you suck the life out and you win today's game and then worry about tomorrow. And, I think, but after sitting around those few days and kind of reflecting and all, you know what it is? I'm ready for this next challenge and the next stage of my career.
How hard that must have been to stare your players down. They were in that room, Grant, and they were listening to someone that they admire, that they care about very deeply, and clearly he feels the same way. I'm sure that was a tough thing for him to do. What was that moment like in that room?
I think it was a special moment, and you could tell the respect that is a two-way street for Brian Snitker and his players in that clubhouse, and really the organization as well. You could hear from Alex, you could hear from Terry McGurk, you could see other Braves employees who made it a priority to be there for that. It's the celebration of, 49 years of on-field action for Brian Snitker. But as he said, you're not getting rid of me. I'm going to be at spring training. I'm going to be around. He's got a contract that will carry him through the next 5 years as a senior advisor. But a very special moment for him. And he's going to go into the Braves Hall of Fame. And he said basically the celebration, the fanfare, it can happen then. It'll work itself out. So I think it's just a very nice final note for what has been an incredible career and one that was kind of unexpected, if you will. Brian Snitker wasn't just the right guy at the right time for this club. it really took a lot to get him into that spot and stay there. And I think that perseverance, that dedication, that's what stands out to me about Brian Snitker.
Man, Snit is a rarity in sports these days. People do not survive 49 years with the same organization anymore, and started literally from the bottom. And to recap, pretty much all the way back to the beginning of his career, take a look at this. How do you measure a career that spans 49 years in the same organization? You can't. As the game of baseball and the Braves organization has evolved, one thing has remained constant. Brian Snitker. With the run of 7 straight postseason appearances for the Braves coming to an end, so too does Brian Snitker's run as the Braves skipper. The ever-present sight of the number 43 jersey sitting in the dugout is ending. What does this organization mean to you?
Oh, it's everything. I mean, I'm a Brave. I don't know anything else.
Snitker was 60 years old when he first became a big league manager in 2016, 39 years after first entering the organization. He's known as not only a baseball lifer, but a Braves lifer. The accolades, they are endless. 2018 National League Manager of the Year, 6 straight division titles, and of course, the pinnacle, a World Series championship in 2021.
It's just unbelievable. I always wondered what it'd feel like. I'm still not sure. I'm kind of numb, honestly.
Snit also had 100-win seasons in both 2022 and 2023. He got his 800th career win this season on September 8th. When the Braves Major League Baseball All-Star Game returned to Atlanta this summer, Snit was named to the National League coaching staff. Before he was even with the big league club, he spent his entire 40s in the minor leagues as a coach. None of Snit's career would be possible without the late, great Hank Aaron, who gave Snitker his first coaching job. Their friendship, it carried throughout the rest of Aaron's days, and Snitker remembers him fondly.
I wouldn't be sitting here on this call if it wasn't for Hank Aaron.
The wins and the trophies, they are wonderful. But Snit's impact on this organization and the time dedicated to the same organization for nearly 5 decades is immeasurable. Thank you to the skipper who brought the Commissioner's Trophy and much more back to the A. How fitting we end with Ronnie and Brian side by side during the parade when they brought the Commissioner's Trophy here to this city. It changed the dynamic of this city, and I know that a World Series championship was in the cards for the Braves before, but it revitalized that belief and that thought in the franchise. Now they are built to win. That leads me to my next question, because they are built to win. There's going to be someone to come in and manage this ship. Now, Grant, you have a whole handful of guys that would make sense for this organization. Run me through a couple of them.
Well, it's a sought-after job, I think, is what's going to stand out. So while the Braves may not have spent a lot of time narrowing down a list prior to Brian Snitker making his decision, I do think there are some names that are going to make sense, whether it's bench coach Walt Weiss, whether it's Mark DeRosa, who is an MLB TV analyst right now, but obviously played with the Braves, had a long playing career, whether it be Bud Black, who was a longtime manager in the National League West, including with Colorado, which I don't hold against him. And then you can look at David Ross, who's a former Brave and a former Cubs manager. So guys with different varying levels of experience, but a lot to offer, I think, in different ways. But the Braves could also find somebody that we're not going to talk about on this day. Just a mild spoiler, not a prediction. I just think it's going to be a very interesting choice for the Braves to make. I don't know that it will bring them the kind of consistency that they've seen since 1990 with just Bobby Cox, Freddie Gonzalez, and Brian Snitker.
Sure.
But they're certainly going to aim high.
Yeah, not a lot of people have been in that seat, and it's a tough job to take on, even though I mentioned they're built to win. And Alex Anthopoulos, the general manager for the Braves, he mentioned he wants it to be a swift search, considering there's so many openings across Major League Baseball. Joe, what are your thoughts on who's next?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because it almost reminds me of like the Pittsburgh Steelers job in football, where it's like it's this very prestigious perch, and there have not really been that many who have been able to take over and do such a good job. My pick is going to be Walt Weiss, as Grant mentioned, the bench coach for the Braves. Just because of the continuity, the familiarity that you have with him, I think that is advantageous for the team. He knows this group of players, even though there's going to be some turnover there as well. Also has a good relationship with Alex Anthopoulos in the front office, and kind of knowing how he processes and works. And so I think that there's a lot of benefits there. I think one of the downsides is that he does have managerial experience, and it did not go well for him in Colorado. So that's maybe something they would have to massage on the PR side of it. But I think he would be a fine choice.
I think that whenever something goes differently than what you planned, you can always have a second chance at life, and maybe Walt Weiss needs a second opportunity. That is possible for him. For me, I'll go very quickly here. David Ross makes a lot of sense for me. He's a players-minded coach. I saw the article where people are saying he needs to get over the exit in Chicago. Forget about that. I think it's going to be fine. If he turns the page to an organization that not only he played for, he's a Georgia native, it makes too much sense, in my opinion. And Rossi is so great, and he's so personable. And I think getting someone a little bit younger in this seat is important at this point in time for the Braves. Someone who can stick around for a long time. He's certainly very well connected in the baseball world, very well thought of and respected. I think David Ross would be an excellent choice. But we will see in the next coming days, possibly weeks. I know AA wants to get it done very quickly, but you want the right person in there. So we'll see who comes in to manage the Braves next. Coming up, Georgia really needed this win pretty bad after they were beat by Alabama. We will recap that and just kind of a crazy weekend in college football. That's next.
Wasn't shocked at all by the response to the team. I mean, I expected it. I mean, to be honest with you, I was proud of the way they played in the Alabama game. And I told them that we got a good football team. It didn't always go our way. We did a lot of good things in that game, and if we continue to get better, then we'll be where we need to be.
FPE, baby. Fire, passion, and energy. Georgia in control from start to finish on Saturday between the hedges, taking care of business against Kentucky 35-14. The Dogs moved up 2 spots in the AP poll. They are back into the top 10 where they rightfully belong. Georgia now 17-3 after a loss under Kirby Smart. They've won 16 in a row over the Kentucky Wildcats, even though that series always seems to be kind of weird for some reason. But Joe, how important was a bounce back win for them, considering they did narrowly lose to Alabama, and they don't need a lot of losses when we're talking about the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, it's always important to bounce back after you have that really disappointing loss that you get so up for in Alabama. I thought what was most impressive about Georgia in this game was that it was just kind of a ho-hum win, like you said, over a Kentucky team that can kind of jump up and bite you sometimes when they are a team that you can tend to look over. You mentioned it, that they were kind of leading from start to finish. And I think that that's an important thing to say. From the start, they were not giving up. The defense was not giving up some of those early touchdowns to their opponents. They took a 14-0 lead and just basically stayed in cruise control in this game. Now, could Kentucky offered a little bit more in this game? Yes, but you beat the opponent that's in front of you. And I think that it just sets Georgia back on the right foot to go forward and still accomplish, I think, what they think they can achieve this year.
To click on every level, as you're mentioning, was very important for the Dogs, especially when you talk about the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Jordan-Hare is a weird place to play football. Okay, I covered Jordan-Hare games for 3 straight years. I saw a lot of weird stuff go down in that building. Perhaps more of that next Saturday. What is important, Grant, when you're looking at the Auburn-Georgia game?
Well, I think Joe just hit on it. You want to start fast. You don't want to be playing from behind the way that they were in the Alabama game. I feel like that was the thing that really kind of had them on their heels a little bit. I mean, all the credit to Alabama. I'm not taking anything away from the team that won that game.
They started to look like the Alabama we know.
Exactly. And Georgia was able to learn from that loss and immediately make the adjustments they needed to, especially defensively, I felt like, against Kentucky. Again, it was Kentucky. So you prepare for the opponent that will be in front of you this weekend, and we know this is a very heated rivalry. So I'm fascinated to see what Georgia's able to do to keep that momentum going, because it's not like you play again tomorrow. You got to ramp the whole thing back up and throw some more logs on the fire there, and I think Georgia has found some motivation for that.
Especially since Auburn is playing better than I think a lot of people expected. They're going to be fired up for the Bulldogs to come in there to Jordan-Hare, and again, they got some new light elements, some light show elements going on down there in Auburn.
It's crazy.
It is awesome, but if you're a Georgia player, don't be looking up thinking this is really cool and focus on what's going on. Another team very focused, I think, and has been from the very beginning, is Georgia Tech. Brinkey's got those guys rolling. They're undefeated. Now they have Virginia Tech this next weekend, since they got to chill a little bit. They got the bye week this week. They're big favorites over Virginia Tech. Joe, how do you think that Georgia Tech needs to handle this situation in order to protect their undefeated record so far?
I think that they probably learned a lot from that Wake Forest game that you're seeing these highlights from, where they, I think, maybe I'm assuming something, but it felt like they overlooked a team in Wake Forest that they were better than, got themselves down to a huge hole, and then had a historic comeback to come back and win that game. But you don't want to get in that habit. To the point we were just talking about with Georgia, kind of not just getting back on track with the win that you needed, but in the manner in which it happened was so important. And I think that that's what will be important for Georgia Tech in this game, which is to make sure that you establish that early lead. Don't let any spooky stuff happen during the game.
Ooh. They have, spooky. I like that word.
It's the season, right?
It is the season. Great job. Haynes King, perhaps the toughest player in college football. He's going to be back at it again against Virginia Tech. Speaking of tough, This crazy schedule that we're talking about for college football, there's always tough games happening. Well, it's nuts now. Miami looks to be back. Yeah. What's happening with the Hurricanes? There were so many upsets. Penn State lost a game that they had no business losing. And what's going on with Florida? There's a lot of reshuffling of the top 25. How did you assess what happened on Saturday?
Well, it's the kind of chaos that we enjoy in
Love
college football. Unless
Spooky?
unless it's your team that's going down, you enjoy this kind of stuff. But yeah, this has been a very strange season in Florida, most certainly. I think Miami had a big statement to make this year, and they have made it thus far. And we're going to see all kinds of other crazy things over the next, month and a half as we really start to get into the heat of when these rankings are going to make a little bit more sense. But the bottom line is go out there and handle business every single week. And some of these teams and some of these weekends are going to be crazier than others, and this was a fun one.
We're on a collision course to a reunion with Carson Beck for Georgia. Mm-hmm. I'm saying it right now. That could happen in the postseason. All right, coming up, guys, it is pretty weird having the first Sunday in October off for the Falcons, but we still got to talk about the Dirty Birds. 2 Sundays in a row we're getting a break, but we'll dive into what happened against the Commanders. That's next. All right, the knight in shining armor for the Atlanta Falcons. I said it. You guys can take it. It's fine. Bijan Robinson. He's the NFC Offensive Player of the Month. Rightfully so for Bijan. What do you think his effect is on this offense, Joe?
Yeah, so, I mean, you could go through the yards, the numbers. That says one story. But I think what he's really adding to this offense is a level of versatility that I think we finally saw Zach Robinson being able to exploit in this last game against the Commanders. When you see them coming out of shotgun in 12 personnel, that would be with 2 tight ends. But then Bijan Robinson can come out in a bunch set on the left side. We saw that. So you're in 12 personnel, but you have a bunch with Bijan Robinson, Darnell Mooney, and Drake London on one side, and Kyle Pitts on the other, and Charlie Warner lined up at the back. That is exactly why you bring a player like him in. I remember when Arthur Smith introduced him, they said that he's not a running back, he's a home run hitter. That's what we want out of Bijan Robinson, and all the different ways you can use him. But we're starting to see him get split out a little bit more, catch some passes, leads the team in receiving at this point. So he's just showing how many tools he has in his game.
It's funny. I remember a lot of people giving the Falcons criticism for how high they drafted Bijan. Mm-hmm. What y'all saying now? Mm-hmm. He is unbelievable. He's an everything player. And another guy who I think is coming along very quickly, rookie Xavier Watts. He's the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Month for the entire league. That's nuts. He's got 2 picks already, the only rookie to have more than 1 interception through 4 games. Grant, what kind of an impact has X had so far? Because this kid is flying all over the field.
Well, I think that's really what it brings to this defense. You wanted to see some energy and some playmakers from this draft class come right in and make their presence felt. He's certainly done that. The interceptions speak loudly because obviously those can change a game very quickly. But I just think his overall play, he has adapted very quickly, and I think he's going to be a guy that just is one of those kind of pillar players that they can build a defense around, and they had a draft that could be full of those. So the fact that we're talking about him and not even some of these other guys right now just kind of lets you know just how well I feel like the Falcons brought in this new crop.
They thought by picking him up in the 3rd round that he was such a steal, and he's proving that by what he's already been awarded by the NFL through 4 games. Let's talk about Michael Penix Jr. for a second. I hate to pile onto him. He was pretty terrible against the Panthers. We all know that. We've talked about it. It's well documented. He had a very good game against the Commanders. Very good turnaround, which I think was key for his confidence, and the offense as well looked better, Joe. What was important about the way that they turned around and were able to shine a little bit?
Yeah, and just to underscore the point of the turnaround, based on EPA, it's expected points added. It's kind of the general metric that you use to judge value of a player. He had the 3rd worst game of any NFL quarterback in that game against the Panthers. Comes back, and at the time of the game, it was the 3rd best game that any quarterback had against the Commanders. And I think that one of the things that we're seeing a lot on these clips is him getting the ball to Kyle Pitts. And I think that's going to be so important for Michael Penix to be successful and for Zach Robinson and this Falcons offense to be successful, is to get one of your potentially biggest playmakers on that side of the ball involved as much as they have been. And he said at the beginning of training camp, got KP the ball a lot today. That's something that happens. And I think we're seeing the fruits of what can happen when you do that.
Yeah, Penix is known for the deep ball. We knew that coming out of Washington. But in the Commanders game, he was able to make those intermediate throws and throws all over the field that were important, a lot of which, to Joe's point, to Kyle Pitts, who is having, honestly, one of the best years that he's had in the NFL so far. I very much enjoy watching film back on Monday and looking at number 8. I can't say that I've felt that way the last couple years.
Totally.
Kyle looks different to me, Grant. What is different about the resurgence of KP and the importance of him in this offense?
Well, the involvement is obviously important, and he's making the most of his opportunities to make these plays. I think that, and you saw this last year in the final 9 games, I mean, he just was not a factor. They were not looking at him. They were not expecting a lot out of him, and that obviously can kind of be the road that leads you right out of an offense, right out of town. But to his credit, put in the work. He's connected with Michael Penix, and that, I think, is a trust factor that's been built. Then you add in the Drake Londons and the Bijans and the Moonies and whoever else you want to throw in there. It just makes it a much more versatile offense with more weapons for Michael Penix to utilize. And Kyle Pitts, I think, considering where he's drafted and where they brought him in, they're loving to see this finally come through, even though it was, I guess, better late than never.
Yeah, and especially in a contract year, it's important for a player to kind of show up.
There is that.
Kyle Pitts Sr. still getting used to that on the back of his jersey. We're excited to see how much he can flourish in this offense for sure. All right, time for today's Georgia Spotlight. How about let's give it up for North Cobb grad and former Yellow Jacket Darren Waller. Is this guy unbelievable or what? It's his first season with the Miami Dolphins, and he's having quite the resurgence so far. This afternoon, he scored his 3rd touchdown in the last 7 days. And if you forgot, he retired last season, but he came out of retirement to be traded to Miami. Things have been working out, to say the least, and don't forget, the Falcons do play the Dolphins this year. Coming up, we wrap things up with Maria's Minute as we look back on a legend. Tonight's Maria's Minute is all about the man who spent nearly 50 years in the same organization, Brian Snitker. But it's a good thing he's transitioning to a role that allows him to keep contributing to the Braves, because we've been missing too much around here. Personable, kind, has an unwavering love for his family and his grandbabies, who he will see much more of now. His wife, Ronnie, honestly, she's the true MVP of all of it. Recalling stories on my podcast about her literally setting up different offices for Snit across the minor leagues before he would even get there. He deserves a proper send-off, which of course means the Braves Hall of Fame in 2026 is a good start. Guys, I hope you had a fabulous weekend and have a great week ahead. Remember, we have another crazy weekend of college football and one more Sunday without the Falcons. See you next week.